Web3 nomads. Everywhere jobs for anywhere people.
Keone, welcome. How was your weekend?
Thanks, Grant. Yeah, it was good. How was yours?
Yeah, as you said before we jumped on, touching grass for a little bit, but the weekends are definitely on 2x speed as compared to through the week. So Monday comes around so quickly.
Yeah, no, I feel you. It's all probably because I spend like half the weekend just sleeping during the day. Get on my couch and then just, I don't know. But yeah, it was a good weekend so far.
Awesome. So I suppose what we like to do is just go back and do some origin stories. So first, can we kick off with your own personal origin story? Then we'll get into kind of the Monad origin story, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure. I've been working for about 10 years. Previously, the past 8 years I spent at Jump Trading, one of the bigger HFT players in the space. I was the team lead of a trading team focused on futures trading, and then later doing some crypto trading. And it was just a really good experience because the job involved building a really high performance system where we'd get millions of packets from exchanges, updates to order books, trades, etc. And we had to very quickly decide what changes that made in terms of what our strategy should do, and then send orders very quickly back to the exchange. Just involves constant optimization and redesign, re-architecting of the system to make it as fast as possible. So just spent a number of years doing that, and then became part of the crypto team at Jump in 2021, and spent a little bit of time researching different protocols. And that was what led me to start MONAD with a couple of other people.
Nice. What I think is really good and really important is, which not to mention any names, but there are certain founders with projects out there that create something for the sake of creating it. And it sounds like with the background, you've kind of seen some real pain points. And that's, from what I can tell from Monad, is what you guys are trying to build there. So it's really nice and refreshing to see someone building from a point of pain as opposed to just creating something for the sake of creating something for once. But for those unaware who are listening, can we do like the Monad origin story, the idea behind why you guys are going to go out and create this new blockchain, and I suppose kind of we can get into the high levels and then get into the nitty gritty a bit further into the conversation.
Sure. So Monad was started at the beginning of 2022 by 3 people, me, James, and Eunice. And James and I had been working together since 2014 at Jump, again, mostly on the traditional side, trading traditional assets. And then both of us spent a little bit of time in Jump Crypto. We were working on different protocols, researching different things, supporting some of Jump's investments, and supporting some projects that Jump was incubating or that Jump was involved with as a contributing member, such as Pith, the high performance Oracle project. And just through experience with Solana and experience with Ethereum and observations about the performance of both of those systems, we realized that there was still a significant need to deliver a more performant solution than either of those. Solana is, officially like 3,000 to 4,000 transactions per second. Most of those are votes. So the real TPS is more like 500 to 1,000. And we could just see that in order to enable mass user adoption, in order to enable and support apps that achieve the level of success of a fairly successful iPhone app, which could have hundreds of thousands or millions of daily active users, you would need a much more performant system behind the scenes. So it was really just started as an effort to kind of reimagine the internals of Ethereum and enable as many transactions as possible to flow through the 2 major stages of the system, which are consensus and execution, and then just trying to solve for that while preserving EVM compatibility and while preserving the same RPC API so that things like MetaMask or Etherscan just work out of the box.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I suppose there was, you guys at Jump, particularly at Jump Crypto, you must have seen kind of a lot of what's going on behind the scenes with, obviously with Ethereum, but Solana seems to be quite closely tied with Jump as well. So I suppose you guys have, would it be fair to say there's some kind of happy middle ground between the two, Solana and Ethereum, where MONAD are looking to kind of fill the gap?
We're definitely taking inspiration from both blockchains and focusing on EVM because realistically that's where almost all blockchain developers are. There's a lot of libraries, a lot of applications, a lot of the applied cryptography research is also just done in the context of EVM. That's something that people don't really think about as much when they talk about EVM versus Move or like the moat that EVM has. But there's just a lot of work that's gone into building things on top of EVM. So it was very clear to us that the most important thing to do is to help improve the EVM performance while still, supporting all of these developers and researchers that are building on top of it.
So has it been completely built from scratch effectively then?
Correct. Yeah. It's basically a reimagining of the interface of Ethereum, but then redoing all the internals to make consensus and execution more performant.
Yeah, it's quite interesting actually when you put it out that way. So was who's kind of the end user that you kind of see? Would it be going down more high frequency trading routes or for settlement on chain, or would it just be like an all encompassing chain that you'd like to see hive activity with regards to DeFi, even NFTs and further afield like that? Is there like one kind of ideal customer client kind of facing, or is it just you just want it like a one size fits all kind of blockchain?
It's one size fits all, and I would say specifically we're thinking about some of the apps that have found product market fit in the past among crypto native users, and thinking about what it would take to actually bring those mainstream. Because if you think about the gas fees that people pay on a daily basis in order to interact with something like Aave. Aave is a great product. A lot of people use it. I think of it like a virtual bank. And in the real world, there are tons of people that use banks to earn interest on their money. But when they go to the ATM and they take out like one $20 bill or two $20 bills. They're not withdrawing like $1,000 at a time. And so if you're withdrawing $40, $50, you don't want to pay $3 in fees. You don't want to pay $5 in fees. You want to pay 1 cent in fees. So it's really getting the numbers to make sense. And right now, the cost of interacting with Aave is several dollars on Ethereum. So it's really taking like some products and ideas for products that clearly are valuable. Like clearly it's useful to be able to deposit your money and then have the bank go loan that money out to someone else and earn higher interest rate on that, and then take a spread and then give you a lower rate that's still non-zero. But we just need the numbers to make sense.
So is there going to be kind of any native apps already built from kind of people landing on day one on the chain, or will there be some kind of ecosystem incubator or something like that to kind of attract developers over there?
Yeah, it's really all of the above. We're working on some reference implementations of some new DeFi protocols. So building some things internally that we'll share to outside teams that could maybe take it and run with it. Also, definitely planning to put a lot of effort into incubation and supporting new developers who are trying to build new things. I think ultimately the thing that's exciting about building on Monad is that we're enabling people to build in a landscape that literally where it was not possible before to build something at that scale. So another example, when I talked about like taking things that found product market fit, but then enabling them en masse. I just think that if a mainstream celebrity drops an NFT collection, like if Justin Bieber drops an NFT collection, he's not going to drop 10,000 profile pics. He's going to drop 1 million trading cards or 2 million or something like that. It's just a much larger number. And so I think the opportunity to build at that scale, it's just literally not been possible to build NFT collections at that scale before, or even broader, more massive scale than that. So we're enabling a new space in the landscape of apps that hasn't been enabled before. And I think we want to work with people that are excited about trying to build apps in that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. So I suppose how we can get into this a little bit. Can we unpack the tagline? So it's like MONAD brings asynchronous parallel execution to EVM transactions. So if we can kind of just unpick that for maybe some lesser experienced people who might be listening after we finish recording. So so is this how we're achieving such large scale and transaction throughput and things like that?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So the couple of major innovations that we do in MONAD. First one is enabling parallel execution of transactions. So that means on each node, when we have a list of transactions that we need to do, right now with existing systems, whether that's Geth or other blockchains that have forked to Geth and are EVM compatible, they basically execute the transactions one after the other, which is really inefficient because if you inspect the transactions, you might see that the first transaction is minting an NFT from some collection, and then the second one is like depositing into Aave. The third one is making a swap on Uniswap. The fourth one is minting another NFT from that same collection as transaction one. So an intelligent system would look at that and say, oh, transactions 1, 2, and 3 have no common dependencies. We can actually run those in parallel. And then transaction 4 needs to be sequenced behind transaction 1. So, we'll set that up so that 4 goes right after 1 on the same core. So in any event, that's the really quick summary of this optimization is we're running transactions in parallel that can be run in parallel, and ultimately getting to the same end state as if we had run the transaction serially. So the transactions are still linear, blocks are still linear. None of that has changed. So from the developer perspective, it's still the same. It's just we execute a lot more efficiently by taking advantage of opportunities to parallelize.
So say, for example, there's a new kind of crazy NFT mint happening on MONAD, and also at the same time for some, say the likes of Aave are over there, and there's like a mass liquidation happening. Is it kind of just being able to separate those two kind of crazy gas intensive areas of the blockchain without getting one extremely congested, and two allowing the throughput to allow those both to happen?
Yeah, that's correct. It's basically sequencing work that is related to each other back to back. So if there's a bunch of people all trying to mint the same collection, then just minting them one after the other on the same core, and then separately doing other work that's not related. And in most blocks, that's the case. Like there's tons of work that is not related to each other. It's just a matter of identifying it and then scheduling it appropriately.
So is the parallelization of the execution, is this where you're kind of seeing Ethereum completely lacking? And if I remember correctly, I think Solana have implemented something to kind of circumvent this as well. But is this one of the main kind of sticking points that you guys have kind of highlighted that you think could allow you guys to hit those kind of transactions per second and things like that?
Right. Yeah, it's one of the major ones. I'll talk about the asynchronous execution in a second also, but I'm glad that you brought up Solana, because Solana also enables parallel execution. But the way that they do that is quite different from how MONAD does that. And I think one key difference is that in Solana, the programs themselves are completely stateless. So Instead, all of the state is stored on external accounts. And whenever a user makes a function call to one of these programs, they have to pre-specify all of the dependencies. Like they specify all of those accounts as inputs into the functions. So it's sort of like in Solana, you just have to be very explicit about all of the information, all the state that you're dependent upon in order to execute this transaction, which makes it easier to parallelize then, because you can the runtime can look at it and say, oh, this function's calling these accounts, this other one's calling these accounts. There's no overlap, so we can run them in parallel. Whereas in Monad, we infer that. We do the hard work under the hood of making it possible to figure out what can be run in parallel, while still preserving the same API as Ethereum and giving developers and users the same experience that they're used to.
Yeah, that's interesting. So how does the parallelization affect finality? Are you guys reaching like near instant finality as well then?
Correct. Yeah, it doesn't affect finality. It's all of the execution is happening after the nodes come to consensus about the contents of the block, which is the asynchronous execution aspect that I could talk about in a second. But just to mention, the consensus itself is Tendermint. So it has the property of single block finality. There aren't forks. It has a lot, the properties that we're already familiar with from other Tendermint chains. But then under the hood, we've re-implemented Tendermint to be a lot more performant than what the typical Cosmos SDK implementation is.
Nice. Yeah, can we get into the asynchronous then?
Sure. Yeah. Right. So I think basically the key takeaway is, in most blockchains, the way that the order of operations works is they're generally leader-based algorithms. So there's a rotating leader. The leader has the right to choose the order of transactions, and also to choose which transactions actually go into that block. The leader is potentially aided by Flashbots or like some other service like that. But in any event, the leader has the right to choose the order and then propose the block. And so the order of operations is the leader will choose an order, the leader will execute all of those transactions, determine the final state after executing, and then make a block proposal, which has the official list of transactions and also a commitment to the state after running those transactions. And then the other nodes hear that proposal, they go execute as well, and then they vote on whether it's a valid proposal. And then they do the Tendermint algorithm or whatever consensus algorithm is being used, which then allows them to come to agreement about whether it was a valid block or to reject. And if they reject, then the process just starts over again. That's what a typical system does. And so you can see in that description that there's a lot of interleaving of execution and consensus. Specifically, the nodes all end up executing the list of transactions before they come to consensus. And that feels like a natural thing to do. But the downside is that the budget for execution is actually very limited in the system, because if you have a 1 second block time, most of that 1 second is actually going to be spent with the nodes communicating with each other, right? Like nodes might be on opposite sides of the world. It takes hundreds of milliseconds to go from, one side of the world to the other. So most of that 1 second is just going to be spent on communication. The budget for execution is actually very, very limited in this kind of system. So that's what most systems do. In Monad, we take the execution out and we run it after the fact. So the nodes are only coming to consensus about the official order of transactions, and voting on whether all the transactions in that proposal are valid. And then after the fact, the nodes go execute. And then there's some mechanisms in place that still enforce agreement about the state that ultimately results from running all these transactions. But because it's done after the fact, what it means is that in addition to having the full 1 second to come to consensus, there's also the full 1 second for each node to execute. And the execution is running a little bit behind, like less than 1 block behind, but it's able to keep up with the consensus.
Yeah. So does that lend itself well to kind of scaling with more nodes on the network as well then?
Yeah,
So as security increases.
right. Yeah. So I think another aspect that, a question that we get a lot is like, if you're building something that's so performant, you must be sacrificing decentralization in order to do that, because everyone is used to the idea that there's
The trilemma.
there's there's this efficient frontier between these two, and if you have more of one, you must have less of the other. And that would be true if we weren't making algorithmic improvements to the system and making the overall flow of consensus and execution and the actual implementation of execution, if we were just keeping that all static. But we're really trying to push the limits of what's possible through both, through software changes, and then having a hardware requirement that's actually quite similar to Ethereum.
Yeah, that's great. So where do you guys stand on kind of the whole monolithic versus modular debate, and which kind of route will you guys immediately be going down? And obviously you could future proof yourself by taking on a more modular approach further down the line, but where do you guys stand on that debate?
Yeah, well, we're just really focused on delivering a full system that can process as much work as possible. We think that that's really that should be the focus of most people that are building systems like these. It's just optimizing. Like, if you're delivering a component, you should deliver the most optimal one possible. I think that at a later point in our timeline, we'll probably be thinking about integrating with roll-up solutions. It's not, there's nothing that is like contradictory to to the system that we're building, but we're just trying to deliver really high performance just through a single unit of computation. That's another thought in my head, is basically that a blockchain, you should think of a blockchain as a unit of computation. Like, a blockchain has a bunch of support for a bunch of applications, and then each of those applications has a bunch of state associated with it, and then there are a bunch of transactions that are trying to interact with some of the applications there. And the measure of success should be like, just how many users can you serve, how many applications can you serve, how dense can the computation be. And I think before we start talking about having there be like many different like copies of MONAD, or many different copies of like other systems that they're just like separate networks being run by separate sets of validators, before we do that, we should just try to optimize one copy of the system and make it as computationally dense as possible. And then at a later point in time, we can think about that. So I think at a later point in Monad's history, we will be thinking about there being multiple monads, like Monad 1, Monad 2, Monad 3, Monad 4. Maybe Monad 2 is like the World of Warcraft monad that has, just the game and then all of the apps that are related to it. And Monad 3 is something else, and they're held together by a bridge that allows you to easily move assets between them. But we just have to make each one of these units as efficient as possible.
Yeah, that makes an awful lot of sense. How do you think about kind of mobile coming into the equation as well as we progress? Obviously, there's a couple of operating systems out there and a couple of blockchains out there that are focusing on their operating systems. Do you think that's going to be it's because it's been kind of relegated to primarily desktop.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few out there that have tried to do it, but we've seen a couple of catalysts towards the end of last year where mobile first could be a real kind of easier barrier to entry for a larger amount of people, I think. But yeah, how do you guys think about that?
Yeah, we're really excited about it. At this point in time, we're really focused on just delivering the core validator improvements. But at a later point in time, we definitely will be spending a lot of cycles on thinking through how to improve the mobile experience, or how to partner with other teams that are focused on that.
Yeah. So what kind of where are you guys at now? Like, what phase are you? What's happening behind the scenes? What have you got coming out next? What's like the next kind of thing that people should be looking out for, effectively, or where are you at in this? I suppose the life cycle of the product.
Mm-hmm. We're in the middle of R&D right now, so the washing machine is proverbially in pieces on the floor right now, which is a very exciting, point to be at. Have really great tests both on consensus and execution that are showing our incremental progress, and we think we'll have a first private test net out in a couple of months that we can show to prospective launch partners. Our expectation is that we'll have a main net later this year, but it's not like next month.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you guys, he's actively raising at the minute.
Not actively raising at the moment. Have some great backers that have been supporting us along the way, so we're pretty good for that right now.
Yeah, that's great. Do you prefer this point in time where it's kind of all a little bit crazy and everyone's just all hands on deck building away, or are you kind of pining for the day that it actually mainnet goes live? Because it's at any stage, like early stage of a new product or a new business getting started, I think it seems a bit crazy whilst you're doing it, but when you look back, it's always like the most enjoyable part, I think.
Yeah, I think we're really enjoying what we're doing right now. Certainly, we want to get the system live as soon as we can, so that we can start solving problems for developers. That's ultimately our customer. It's the developer who has devoted a lot of time to building things in Solidity or Viper, and has built some really great applications for EVM, but is struggling with the high cost of gas, the high, the relatively non-plentifulness of transactions, struggling with needing to cut corners in terms of including a lot of defensive assertions in their code, because each defensive assertion costs gas, and gas is expensive. I think there's just a lot of areas where we can improve the developer experience, initially purely by just making gas a lot cheaper, so that then it's people can write more secure code. People can avoid like weird gas golfing tricks that save a little bit of gas but make the code hard to read, and just get toward a more secure environment that way. At a later point in time, there will also be other improvements that we make to the EVM. That's another thing I wanted to mention, is that we're backward compatible with EVM, but also introducing some new functionality. So that'll help with security as well. We can probably talk more about that at some later time, but ultimately the goal is to solve problems for developers. So we definitely want to get in the wild helping developers as soon as we can. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. I think you're seeing an awful lot of that kind of thing going on. I know the Fuel Network guys had the Fuel VM and things like that, because there's obviously, as you're saying, there's an awful lot of stuff that happens that from the average retail investor or the average user of the blockchain wouldn't necessarily understand. But then when you actually start speaking to developers, there's a million and one different pain points. But I suppose from a product standpoint, which you've kind of alluded to as well, it's these people who are wanting to build kind of stuff in the EVM environment are just kind of hindered by its capabilities at this point in time. So I suppose with the likes of you guys building what you are actually building, it opens the door for like infinitely more possibilities. Is there any kind of DApp that you think would be great, but it's just in its current format, particularly on like the Ethereum mainnet or even on Arbitrum or something like that, it's just completely hindered by the EVM capabilities at this point in time? Or is it more of just a overarching kind of improvement on the like let's say just the Ethereum mainnet? So like, is there any kind of DApp that you can immediately think of that could benefit hugely from you guys?
Yeah, I think among apps that exist right now, oracles will benefit a lot from much higher throughput. Like if you look at Chainlink right now, the update frequency on Ethereum mainnet is for ETH USD, it's like anytime the price moves by 0.5% or once an hour, which is just crazy because like the S&P 500 could go entire days without moving by 0.5%, or even ETH, like that period where it was like always around like 1200 or 1400. Like there could be a long period of time where there's no Oracle update. And ETH is actually the asset they update the most frequently because it's obviously the most important one. Like some of the other ones have crazier policies. It's like 2% move before we update. That's also a problem kind of close to our heart because I mentioned Pyth before. So Pyth is a high fidelity Oracle, initially built on Solana. Now I think moving to PythNet, which is a fork of Solana. But in any event, when we started MONAD last year, we just observed that I think something like 50% of Solana's throughput was being consumed by Pyth, which is crazy because Pyth wasn't even like fully scaled out. It was like 50-ish assets being quoted by 50-ish data providers. And so you ask the question, like, what happens when there's 500 assets? There's 500 stocks in the S&P 500. What if they want to quote all of them? So it's just very, even with existing apps, it's clear that there's the need for higher throughput, but in the current state of affairs, as a community, we just run a lot of these things at a very scaled down version just to, compensate for the low throughput and high gas.
Yeah, God, that's crazy. So would you guys consider building your own Oracle, or would you integrate?
No, I think we would integrate with a external team that has already done that.
Yeah, that's interesting. There was just so we got onto target audience. Obviously, there's a huge kind of focus on developers. Let's just see. I did have a question from community.
One other thing I wanted to mention about things that require high performance, limit order books. To my knowledge, there's not really a limit order book on EVM. There's some on layer 2s, like DYDX is on StarkX. And then there's CRM, or now Open Book, on Solana. But it's kind of a similar story there. Like if you look at CRM, when we started MONAD, it was like 30% of Solana's throughput. And that was with kind of like, nascent level adoption of CRM. In our previous experience as high frequency traders, we were interacting with markets where a single market could have like 5 million updates a day, or maybe more. And it just feels like there's much higher throughput needed for limit order books. And then one of the benefits of enabling that is that for retail users, like when they're trading against limit order books, they can get better pricing than they can if they're trading against an AMM, because the limit order book's liquidity is being maintained by a professional market maker who's keeping their liquidity really close to whatever the fair value is, because they can constantly adjust their prices up and down as the price is moving around on other exchanges. And you can't do that on Ethereum because the cost of each one of those updates would be way too much. So instead, right now we've opted for the AMM model, where there are no updates at all for liquidity or almost no updates for liquidity providers. But then it means that most of the liquidity is not near bid ask. And yeah, it's a worse experience for users. They experience a lot of slippage.
Yeah, I wouldn't even like to think about an order book on Ethereum and that.
Yep. Yeah, it'd be like $5 anytime you wanted to update a quote.
Code, yeah. Now that'd be interesting. Has there been any strong consideration of how MEV plays a part in MONAD, or how that will actually look from your end?
Yeah, we're still evaluating the exact decision about how transaction ordering will be determined. I guess I would just emphasize that it's kind of orthogonal to the other parts of the system, because basically the leader just somehow comes up with an ordering and then proposes it, and then the rest of the system flows. Whether they choose it by accepting a bundle from a searcher, or whether they use a priority gas auction or something else, is sort of an independent consideration, but it's something that we're thinking through a lot right now.
Awesome. So is there any other, you mentioned there was one other guy from Jump who's on the team. Is there any kind of other kind of rock stars that are on the team that we should be aware of?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So the person I was referring to before is James, our CTO. Again, I worked with him since 2014. He's an incredible system architect. He just has amazing intuition for identifying how the system should be improved and then making the necessary changes to make that possible. And he's done that a number of times over the years, and now doing that within, I guess you could say, with the Ethereum system. Beyond that, we actually have another person from Jump, Alex, who has 3 years of experience from Jump, working in the core dev team there. And then several other people who have HFT or firmware development experience, or kernel development experience in networking devices.
Nice. It seems like it's as I say, been built from people who've seen pain points in the industry, which is always the best way to go and build something. Yep. There's a lot of people in the industry that will just, as I say, build stuff for the sake of building it and try and fix problems that don't need solving. So it's quite reassuring, quite refreshing, actually. So yeah, kudos. But I think that's about it from me. Is there any way you'd kind of direct people to come find you guys, or is there any way you want to kind of point people to go and take a look at you guys? Is it just basically through Twitter or Discord, or where would be the best place?
Yeah, I think the main areas right now are Twitter, monad_xyz on Twitter, and then our website, monad.xyz. Our Discord is closed right now, but if people want to DM me to get involved, or DM monad.xyz, we'd be happy to welcome you to our community.
There we go. I'll leave all that in the description as well. So if you need to take a look at that, just head below. But yeah, thank you very much. That was really insightful. And kind of wishing it was a little bit closer so we could give it a test drive. But
yeah, you'll be the first to try it out when we are live.
Just have to be patient. Yeah, and when it's ready, let's kind of let's run this back again, get like a little demo going on so people can actually see it visually. I think that'd be really great. And if there's anything you guys need from us in the meantime, just ask. We'll be more than happy to help. Always looking to help people who are bringing something really positive to the space. So yeah, use us at your disposal.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Grant.
All right, take it easy.